One of the things I think we need to have a conversation about, and one of the things that I see happening a lot, is people who self-diagnose. And I'm here to tell you, don't self-diagnose. Go to a medical or a licensed medical or licensed mental health professional. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I have been working in the mental health sector for many years now. And I kind of want to have this conversation because, people have been asking me a lot about how to vet a good therapist and, what to look for and so on and so forth. But one of the things I also wanted to talk about was, when people come to see me, a lot of times people aren't sure, but they've done some research on the internet. Somebody has told them that they have some symptoms. And I typically work with one of two categories, right? Perpetrators of abuse and violence, or people who are victims of abuse and violence. And I've worked with some mental health problems in between, but normally, toward the end of when I was seeing people were coming to see me for one of those two things. And one of the things that people frequently do, unfortunately, especially if they're a victim of abuse, they'll say, well, my partner, my spouse, my husband, whatever, said that I was the problem and I have this, and this, and that they weren't going to come to therapy with me because they've tried to get their person in couples counseling. They weren't going to come to therapy with me, that I'm the problem, and that I have all this mental health stuff in this and that. And so now I don't know what to do because I think I'm crazy. I've been told by this person that I care about that I'm crazy, blah, 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 blah. Some sort of generalized variation of that is kind of how that story goes, right? Or it could be, I took this quiz on, I just took this quiz. I'm INFJ, and this is blah 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 blah, right? Or I've taken this quiz and I found out that I have anxious attachment style, and blah 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 blah. So a lot of times people run with that. Or now you hear a lot of people, I took this quiz and I've got ADHD, or I'm autistic now. And you kind of have these people that are taking these things that they've done online, or that they've, kind of heard another one that Dr. Phil said, so I guess a lot of people consider him to be end all be all. Dr. Phil said this and Dr. Phil said that, so I do get a lot of that too. And, Dr. Phil, whatever, there's more clinicians out there than Dr. Phil, not to knock what he's doing, right? But I don't go based off of what you've read or you've heard online and take that and run with it. It's like, yes, that is now me. I'm now diagnosed with that. And, so I'm going to navigate through the world with this diagnosis that I've given myself. And people can convince themselves that there's something wrong with them, or that there's some pathology that isn't necessarily there or isn't necessarily real, if that makes sense. I personally don't believe in the avoidant and anxious attachment stuff or the INFJ stuff. Those aren't, and I can do another video about that. But so I won't get into it here, and I know people are probably going to fight me about that, but I get down to people are people. And so I sort of break down everything that's going on with you individually, you and your family systems, you and your partnership, you in the workplace, because I personally, I think people are layered, and it's usually not just one thing. It can be, if there was a significant traumatic event that kind of stops a person right in their tracks. It can be those things, but a lot of times people are multifaceted. There's like all these different things that are sort of going on. And so when you diagnose yourself, you're sort of operating from that mindset. You've convinced yourself to follow this narrative, or you've convinced yourself that there's a problem. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and they've either convinced themselves or been convinced that they have a pathology that just isn't there. Right. And so unfortunately, there was a lot of psychological harm and things like that went on during that, and people have all of these feelings that stay stuck, that keep them shamed inside their homes, inside their bodies, and they won't reach out and get help. So I always encourage people, go get help, go to see someone who is a very good diagnostician, right? The person can help you sort of diagnose and parse out what's actually wrong with you. The other thing I tell people, and some people don't like this, but have the conversation about medication. even if you ultimately decide not to take it, I think it's worth having a conversation about whether or not that's a good fit for you. And medication doesn't have to be forever. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're just going through a really hard time right now, and you should consider it possibly if your social, emotional, and occupational functioning have been severely impacted and are affected. And that's just general, right? So everybody's case is a little bit different. And I know I'm probably going to get some people on here, well, I had this kind of bad experience, blah, blah, blah. Sure, we've all had bad experiences with medical and mental health professionals. Here's the beauty, though. Go get another opinion. Go see someone else and keep going until you find one that sort of fits with you, that fits with your narrative. Even like on social media, I'm sure, people who listen to me or watch me, if you listen to other therapy personalities and people like that, you always have to find the person that fits right for you, because it's not a one size fits all. Everybody's not the same. So, you kind of have to do your due diligence and work out what feels right, what feels most comfortable, and what sort of helps you to straighten out what's going on with you mentally. But try not to fall into that loophole of self-diagnosing, because it's not always the case. One of the things I'm finding that more and more with is autism and ADHD or ADD, which I tell people all the time, it's not likely you have that, and here's why, but mental health symptoms and diagnosis, a lot of them can overlap, right? Because their symptoms are very similar, but a true diagnostician is really going to help you sort of flush that stuff out, right? Because I think it takes a combination of learning about your history. It also helps, I do psychological and neuropsychological testing. So it also helps if you have someone. It's not always necessary, but it's good if you have that. There's someone who's very familiar and well versed in doing that and can kind of help with that should you need further assessment and testing. But yeah, always, find out what's really going on. Just like you don't want to, look at something and say, oh, I have this medical condition. I've just diagnosed my medical condition. Go see a doctor and see if that's really true. And if so, find out what's the appropriate treatment, because there is something also called biogenetics, right? Everybody, it isn't a one size fits all, even in the medical field. Sometimes people of color, their test results are going to look different. They have to take a different sort of treatment or a different medication. Even now, you can have biological testing done, even for psychotropic medications, because you may biologically not respond to all medications the same. So there's all these other little nuances, and you don't want to do yourself a disservice by just sort of walking around. I can't tell people what to do because we're all grown, but this is my suggestion. Always try to go to see someone and, figure out what's going on and figure out the most appropriate treatment that's going to work for you. And listen, right? Don't go and see someone and they tell you something and then I'm going to do what I want to do, because you got people that do that too. That like, I'm not going to do it this way because I feel like I know what's best. You may know what's best for you, but I also know what's best for mental health. So you have to learn how to trust your clinician and build that rapport and being honest as well. Hope that helps.